All right, folks. Today we're diving into a reimagined classic, Disney's live-action Snow White. It's not your average remake, so let's break it down.
Yep, this review promises something special. Not just another cash grab, but a movie that actually brings fresh elements to the table. So, for those of you who might be skeptical, don't worry, we've got you covered.
Exactly. I mean, we've all seen the countless remakes, right? But this one seems to be doing things a little differently. The review even calls it the best Disney remake since Cinderella. Bold claim, huh?
That's huge. Given how many of these remakes tend to be more about style than substance, I'm curious to see what makes this one stand out. Let's dive into what's still familiar from the original.
So, it's got the essentials. The evil stepmother, Snow White on the run, the dwarves, the poison apple, and the eventual true love's kiss. The foundation is all there.
That's a relief. We don't want them messing with the basics, right? But what about the characters? The review says there are some pretty significant changes here.
Absolutely. The director, Mark Webb, and the screenwriter, Erica Cresto Wilson, gave the characters more depth. These aren't just the same two-dimensional figures from the animated classic. They've got backstories and real motivations now.
That's a solid move. Giving them depth could make the story feel a lot more engaging. But what about Rachel Zegler as Snow White? There was a lot of buzz around her casting, especially because of her Latina heritage. How does she hold up in the role?
The review really emphasizes her performance. They call her a natural Disney princess, from the moment she steps on screen. And they say she brings a quiet earnestness mixed with a real sense of purpose.
So, no more waiting around for a prince to rescue her, huh?
Not at all. This Snow White is proactive, not passive. She's got her own goals. She's investigating her father's disappearance and planning to return to her kingdom to rule with compassion.
I love that. It's like they're flipping the classic trope on its head. And speaking of changes, I heard they dropped the 7 dwarfs from the title. That definitely reinforces the idea that Snow White is at the center of her own story.
Right. It's all about her individual journey now. Even the song Someday. My Prince Will Come is out. Instead, we've got a new track, Waiting on a Wish, which really drives home her independence.
That's so refreshing. And what about the prince? Is he just another charming hero in shining armor?
Not quite. Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnap, is more of a roguish type. The review compares him to Flynn Rider from Tangled, so he's not the perfect prince you might expect.
Okay, that's definitely a shift. So, their relationship, does it develop like in the original, or is it different?
It's actually pretty unique. They meet in the castle, but their connection starts off more like partners in crime. It's less about instant attraction and more about building camaraderie and mutual respect.
That's a modern twist for sure. So, how does the review feel about their chemistry?
They say it's genuine. The duet. A hand. Meets a Hand is a highlight, and the chemistry between Zegler and Burnap feels natural. Their kiss? It's earned, which is a nice touch.
That word earned is key. It means the romance doesn't feel forced. It's developed over time.
Exactly. But here's where the review starts to get a bit critical. The dwarves. There's been some controversy, especially around the portrayal of little people in the film.
Right? They've opted for extensive CGI for most of the dwarves, which the review finds jarring and distracting. It's a bit of a letdown compared to the more realistic look of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, especially given the sensitivity around the portrayal of little people. But, hey, at least the other voice actors, like Titus Burgess and Andrew Barfeldman, seem to bring some humor to the roles.
True. Now, let's talk about the music. There's always a lot of focus on that with Disney movies. The new songs by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul have already been making waves.
The review definitely thinks these songs could lead to award buzz. They might sound a little familiar to fans of Pasek and Paul's work, but that's a mark of great songwriters, having a signature sound without being repetitive.
Sounds like they nailed it musically. Did they mention anything about Rachel Zegler's vocals?
Yes, they described her voice as crystal clear, especially when compared to Gal Gadot's performance as the evil queen. Godot's vocals are almost metallic, which makes sense for her cold, villainous character.
Interesting contrast there. So, how does Godot do as the evil queen?
The review says she makes the most of her role, chewing the scenery and really embracing the villainous side, even though her character isn't as developed as Snow White's.
All right, so we've got a lot of positives here, but what about the ending? The review mentions something pretty different about the third act.
Yes, and it's a big surprise. The movie doesn't have the typical big battle we're used to seeing in these kinds of films. Instead, it focuses more on character resolution and thematic closure.
That's a bold choice. It suggests the film isn't just about spectacle. It's about the journey and the character's growth.
Exactly. So, what's the final verdict? The reviewer says the film balances the familiar with fresh perspectives and new ideas. They even mention that this remake made them more excited for the upcoming Lilo and Stitch remake.
So, it sounds like Disney might be onto something here. For anyone who loves the original but also craves a modern update, this might just hit the spot.
I'd say so. But the real question is, how do we balance our love for these classic stories with the need for them to evolve with the times?
It's a tricky balance, nostalgia versus innovation, but it's a conversation worth having, especially with how many classic tales are getting reboots.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the new Snow White. A refreshing take on a classic tale, and it might just be worth your time.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Catch you next time.